Welcome to Expedition Self on OMTimes Radio with lifelong learner, entrepreneur, and creator of the worlds of Expedition Self, Sam Parrotto. Sam shares 4 decades of studying, guiding, and teaching how to go inside so we can build an incredibly powerful, dynamic, and validating relationship with the self. Expedition Self is laced with stellar, unexpected insights about what it means to be human. Listen now and ignite your self-development process with Sam Parrotto.
Well, hello. Welcome to our show. I am Sam Parrotto, and I'm the host for Expedition Self. I want you to know I have tried to pull off this Crusty Brain show for almost the entire month of September, and one thing after another, and it ended up pushing itself right into October. So I'm going to take the case that it is supposed to be right at this time, and it's relevant and essential for those of you who are listening, and that if it had happened in September, it would have missed its mark. And one of the other things that happened in September is I turned 60. And it was such a huge rite of passage. I had this sense for the last year, really, that I was coming up on this time where I was going to lay some things to rest, say goodbye to some other things, and really, really begin to start to look to the future. And I have to say, I think that happened. I'll probably be talking about how I found myself on my birthday looking forward and really celebrating where I have come from and who I am and what it is that I'm hoping to be able to experience in life, right, in the coming decades. So anyway, so I show up today, officially 1 year older, and I'm pretty excited about it. And we're going to talk about the crusty brain. And I hope when I say crusty, you picture the most luscious, crusty bread that's real hard on the outside and squishy on the inside. Or when I was little, the mud would get this crust on top of it in some of the washes where the water would run down and then dry out in the desert. And when I would walk over it, I could hear the crunch, 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 the crispy edges like giving way and becoming just plain old dirt once again on top of the mud. So you might be saying, though, what the heck is crusty brain? What does this have to do with growth and development and consciousness? So I'm going to give you a little bit of a backstory for this word crusty. A while back, I started to think about the even beneath, right, experiential, but the real feel of a person, right, or a gathering, or the quality of an exchange, to try to really get it more into the sensory area of vocabulary. And so I've woven my thoughts about this through many, many of these hours. I think it started, though, a long time ago when I read some novel, and it was the story of an Aborigine on his walkabout and how he related to this idea of energy, the idea of consuming live energy and transforming it into a new state, right? And so he was describing the eating of an egg while he was out on his walkabout, and it was a non-cooked egg. And of course, I translated it to eating a strawberry right off the vine. And when I was a little girl in Southern California, I used to pick raspberries and blackberries right off the bushes. They just grew at the parks that I would play at. Or the other idea is like alfalfa sprouts, how they're still growing when you pull them out of their package and place them on the sandwich. So this idea of live, that's what I want you to focus on. And at the same time, I was noticing my own energy level when I would discover some new piece of information about myself, some mystery that all of a sudden became known, some connection that I would make between why I bit my fingernails and my own relationship to picking on myself that I never saw, right? And or another one would be like, that's the reason I struggle to live off of checklists. And when I would when I would see these new things, my energy, my sense of like being able to just like go, make things happen, like generate and feel this kind of surge, it would soar because of this newness of that little piece of self-data. It also, and I'm hoping you're kind of tracking with me, it would happen when I would talk to someone about an issue or a challenge, even ones that dealt with something about me that I had done, like something where I was supposed to be apologizing in some way, where I was going to have to feel remorse or embarrassment or something. Is like if they all of a sudden shared some new piece of insight or information or understanding that sprung spontaneously from the conversation, I was over the moon. It would be like, it sounds like this, like, I think I'm resentful about that now that I think about it. And I think I've been resentful about other situations that played out like this one did. Now that would be something someone could say to me. And I would like, really? Do you feel resentful? It was like just so, like I was getting to sprout in that moment myself. I was having this opportunity to be present for an original experience. So instead of someone saying the same thing, something I already expected, something that has already in some way been consumed, it was seeing the light of day in that moment for the first time. And each time I have to say that the feeling of it inside of me had this kind of quality of gloriousness. Do you know what I'm describing? Have you encountered these kinds of moments yourself when something surprised you or came in an unexpected way, something brand new about you or others or life made it into your awareness? And can you connect with whatever the feeling is that you had? All of this attention about what got my attention built into my ideas around consciousness and how do we get access to it? Because being more conscious meant that I got to be with new energy and insight and experience more often. Now, I don't know about you, but I think there's always a constant intellectual conversation about why am I doing this hard work? Why do I have to feel things I don't really want to feel? Why do I have to uncover stuff about myself I might not like? And so that feeling that comes from this new information, this was a big draw to me. And it did lead me to begin to try to describe spaces that lacked this newness, this fresh idea, whether it was how people were being, or whether it was how relating was happening, or whether it was even about just the spaces we place ourselves in geographically, a room, right? Or in a car with a bunch of friends. So words like cardboard began to mean, to me, someone or a time when I didn't have access to some new information. Because if you think about cardboard, cardboard is trees with all the life and moisture, and this is my made up word, squoze out of them. So to me, I translated that into the idea that there was a place where people would shut down their emotions and have kind of I want to say dead, but not quite dead, but like a diffused expression of their life force energy. Or then this idea of slippery, that we could never really settle into a feeling with someone or couldn't find a place to rest emotionally in conversation. It's not really unusual for writers and artists to draw parallels between nature and their subject, but I found it really helpful to see these parallels when talking about human dynamics and being. And it kind of cut through a lot of even the judgment at some level. So I would like to encourage you to do this as you work on your self-development, to think of yourself in terms of inanimate objects. Today, I feel like a turnip. Think about the quality of aliveness in a turnip, or a tomato, all the seeds and the juice and the liquid and the squeezy nature of that, or a box or a piece of cardboard, because I think it helps to remove the emotional material for just a moment and give it an animate, right? A place to start from, right? Animate something that's inanimate. But to do this, it also means that you have to check in with yourself to be able to notice anything, right? Which we know is the big practice of growth work, is the checking in, asking the questions. How often do you actually check in with yourself and say, well, where am I right now? What's going on with me? What needs do I have? Or what's the quality of my being? I've had few moments where I had no emotion available to me, and I could feel myself as if I was an icicle, like cool, like the inside of where they keep big meat lockers, right, where it's real cold. And it was helpful to go, oh, I wonder what's happened that I don't have access to the warmth, right, that I might typically feel. See, this willingness to stay in lockstep with yourself is the way we build our own self-esteem. I know we talk a ton about how self-esteem is built by, how we're interacted with as children, and the messages and the modeling and the traumas that come and what we do with that. But what's hidden inside of that statement is that a lot of times as children, we're also not taught or encouraged to stay in relationship with all that's going on, to keep listening, to pay attention. Really, the messages continually are, come over here, ignore that. Oh no, you'll be fine. Don't worry about the sadness. Right? Or don't notice what's going on in your body. Just get back up and play soccer. Because the people around us, they want us to be okay, or they want us to behave, or they want us to, grow up so that it looks like we're going to be successful. Whatever the adults are afraid of, right? At some level, they're projecting onto us. Adult self-esteem is about valuing what's going on with you so much that you want to know all that's there, whether you like it or not. You're willing to be with it. So to circle back, you can see where this hack, which I love these little hacks, right, for our minds, of what inanimate or non-emotional way can I describe myself right now, how that hack can be helpful. Okay, ask yourself this question. What thing am I feeling like? Let the first thing show up, whatever it is. What thing am I feeling like, and where am I right now? Right? What thing, what inanimate object is a match for what you feel like you're being right now inside your experience as a human, as a person? Don't critique it. Don't evaluate it. Just let yourself notice how deeply you're connected to your whole self, and what you can garner and pick up as you ask the question. And let yourself capture any images or sounds or words, right, from a song or animal moving around in your consciousness, right, or a refrigerator or a wheelbarrow, and then truly appreciate all that's happening inside yourself. Just let those images show up. The reason this builds self-esteem is because you are caring for yourself by paying attention without assessing whether it's a good thing or a bad thing that you see, and you're describing it. Now, I think that sounds like a very simple sentence, but when I talk about it, I mean like doing it more and more and more frequently, caring for yourself by paying attention, and finding ways that intrigue your brain. Finding ways to notice yourself or describe yourself that your brain pops up like a prairie dog and says, "Woo, woohoo, ooh, what's that? Ooh." So if I notice that I felt like cardboard, then I might try to backtrack and find the last moment before I began to feel like cardboard. Now, this is something I don't know that everyone really spends time doing, is getting in touch with that core experience, really getting in touch, right? Oh, I feel like cardboard. And then utilizing your mind while it's connected to the body and the emotions, and then hunting by going through the past like a reel, right, that's running backwards to find the moment just before you felt that, or as you slid into it. I might find moments when I felt one of the core energy sucks for us humans. And I really do see these as energy sucks, and I think they are woven inside every single 60-second period of our lives. Hopelessness, powerlessness, helplessness, and shame. You could throw guilt in there if you wanted to, right? If you just want to put a little cherry on top of that. Right? So I might look for those things because I know that if those are energy sucks, that might have had something to do with why I ended up as feeling like cardboard. All right. When we come back, we'll talk some more about Crusty Brain.
A conscious lifestyle for a mindful life. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM.
OMTimes magazine is one of the leading online content providers of positivity, wellness, and personal empowerment. A philanthropic organisation, their net proceeds are funneled to support worldwide charity initiatives via Humanity Healing International. Through their commitment to creating community and providing conscious content, they aspire to uplift humanity on a global scale. Connect at OMTimes.com. OMTimes, creating a more conscious lifestyle.
My name is Victor Furman. Some call me The Voice. I've always been fascinated with human nature, spirituality, science, and the crossroads at which they meet. Join me Wednesdays at 8 p.m. Eastern on OMTimes Radio, and we'll explore these topics and so much more on Destination Unlimited.
You came across someone struggling with hunger. How would you recognize them? Would you notice an 8-year-old girl who's not excited for summer break
because she may not be having lunch again until September?
Or a war veteran who's having a hard time
landing a job and getting back on his feet?
I am the 1 in 8 Americans who struggle with hunger. I am hunger in America.
Hunger can be hard to recognize. Learn why at IamHungerInAmerica.org, brought to you by Feeding America and the Ad Council.
We're back. I'm Sam Parrotto. You're listening to Expedition Self. And today we are talking about Crusty Brain. So the thing about growth work is that it's largely dependent on you revealing to yourself new information. And we repeat ourselves to ourselves a lot. We like familiarity and we walk over the same ground over and over. But it's this new information that moves us forward, and it helps us evolve. And it's for this reason that I caution people about studying or working with the same modality forever, right? The same one over and over, because the minute you know what to expect and you can fill in the blanks, the part of your brain that knows things is now running the show, and the unconscious part is actually relegated to working in the background because it's pushed back there. And of course, when that happens, there's no new experience. And you become more cardboard-like for longer and longer, which makes it harder to get back to the original newness. You see, the minute the knowing brain gets authority, it is working very hard to keep the unknowing part out of the limelight. That's why, really, again, this idea of crusty brain is cultivating the opposite of that. I often think the children, they help us to remember what that was like. Thank goodness for them, right? They offer so many gifts unknowingly, and I'm going to say it this way, it's kind of a little rough, but we take from them all of the time and probably don't even realize it. This is what today's show is about. This idea of crusty brain is that with all that we're trying to get in touch with our whole self, the brain is as much of a help as it is a hindrance. And the more you work with your brain, the more you see yourself as bigger than your brain, the more you can make sure it's on the helping side rather than the impediment side. Because it's like a machine doing a job that none of us actually recognize is at work much of the time. I have a whole bunch of little pieces to share with you today about this, so it may feel like I'm bouncing around a bit, but I hope by the end of the show, you'll have a sense of how you are a closed system, how you might be more attentive to why this closed system of you gets in the way of transforming your life experience, and how if it gets in the lead of your day, it will cause you to feel more and more cardboardish. All right, so this is a call-in show, and if anything has struck you up to this point, I would love to hear from you, right? The live part of the show is always new information for me. You actually provide that. It gives me energy, which I know that brings other people's energy, including you, the caller. So because you don't know what you're going to say until you say it. So part of the aliveness of this show is for that reason, right? You don't know what I'm going to say until I say it. And that's just a bunch of new information all the way around, right? So the number is 202-570-7057. I hope you'll call. I can't say enough about being in pursuit of new information. It's just so easy to get stuck in a rut, to repeat yourself, the same stories, the same jokes, the same triggers, the same feelings coming up, all that familiarity. It just doesn't produce the zing of being alive. And I'm not saying you have to try to be unpredictable and be contrived about it. I'm saying that it's about searching out new truths about yourself and about others and life. Now, this first piece I've talked about before, and it's called recognizing the edge of your own brain. Do you have any recollection when you realized that your brain had a boundary, a place you didn't know, a place where you didn't recognize what someone was actually describing through their experience, one where you didn't have the answer you were seeking? Well, I found it by accident. So throughout my life, when I would look into the mirror, most times, this is going to feel a little dramatic, but I would feel this tug at my lip to curl over. And so during one session with my guide and mentor when I was in my 20s, the sense of it showed up. And so we began to work with what was happening. And I immediately saw these circles in my abdomen as I was going inside and doing creative visualization. And they were diluting most of the light, right? Like a texture that light could come through. And I found myself standing on the inside of me looking out. But only one had a layer of skin over it that wouldn't take too much to have it be open to the air. The others, the layer was so thick, there was no way you could just poke at it and something would open up. Of course, it kind of freaked me out because I'm like, what am I doing with all these circles on my abdomen, that like light comes in? And I wasn't sure what to do with the image. But what came with it was this discovery that my lip curling on the edge when I looked in the mirror, it was attached to this unconscious sense of wishing that my entire body could turn inside out. Like talk about a wild thought process. And it was so real because I was actually in my body connecting with this. And I realized that this was a new piece of information, and I didn't even know that I was looking for it. And of course, as I did some more work with it, what showed up or made sense, I guess, at the time as my intellect was this deep, deep, deep sense of shame that I was carrying with me. So as I stayed in the visualization, this Pan-like character, like Peter Pan, he was dressed all in green, looked a little like the Riddler from that old-time Batman, but was much smaller. And he kept nudging at me and poking at the hole, jumping from organ to organ, looking up at these holes. This was a wild creative visualization. And he had this little fork and kept stabbing at me as if I was supposed to be opening up the remaining layer to the air outside. So you picture this like your abdomen, right? And then there's this one circle that looks like it's actually going to open from the outside to the inside. I was like, what is this? And I dialogued with the little Pan character. He wasn't really a big talker. He liked to use that little fork thing to poke at me. So after a while, I then boarded this imaginary elevator up to my brain to find some kind of information about what all this meant. Now remember, we're still talking about how did I discover the edge of my brain? So I imagine this elevator and I arrive, and of course the cast of characters that's usually there, ancestors and guides and aspects of me at different ages, they weren't there. And so I began to walk around out of this kind of library that I always lines my picture of my brain. And it's over to the left. And I walked over this big concrete slab. And as I make my way around, looking at some level at a direction I hadn't looked before, I got to the end of my brain. And at that time, you could say, oh, this was just a creative visualization. You're making it all up. But what happens if any of you have ever done this? You know that when you get it in your body, it just really makes it so real, so dependable, so something that even if it isn't real, it helps to open something up. And as I got to the end of my brain, I'm like, oh, I never knew this, but there's an end to my brain. There's a place where I stop and something else starts. And it was amazing. It was amazing. Now, maybe this may seem obvious to you that there is an end to your brain, a place where you stop. But until that very moment, when I was like 25 years old, everything that happened outside of me seemed like it happened inside of me. I couldn't separate. It was all one big projection. If someone said blue, I thought of blue in my brain, and that meant that the idea and that someone and my thoughts were all one. Of course, what it did is it had me be kind of omnipotent at some level, right? Because all things I figured were in my brain. So when you think about it, it meant that no thing in the world or with someone else could I acknowledge as being outside of what I thought and what it could conceive and perceive and relate to, as if I had everything inside of myself that could fathom everything outside of myself. And again, I'm thinking some of you probably already get this, but this particular thing was very important in the context of this exploration of Crusty Brain. There was a limit to my brain, and it shocked me. Maybe it came in a relationship when you knew you didn't understand why someone else was in the predicament they were in, or they made the decisions they made. Maybe that's how you knew there was an edge to your brain. And, perhaps it was what my brain did to cope with everything that I did growing up. It just claimed it all as its own. But have you gotten to the edge of your brain and known it? This was my first real glimpse into Crusty Brain. because it was the first time I really understood that my brain wasn't the be-all, end-all that I walked around experiencing it as. I started to see it for that it had a limitation, that it had a construct, that it had framing. Because I think, therefore I am, that Descartes quote, it really sank in. And so I'm wondering about this for you. If and when did you find the edge of your brain? So the reason this matters when you talk about crusty brain is because at some level, we have to start seeing that our brains don't have all the answers, that they're not right, that they don't figure it all out. It is actually part and parcel to becoming that student, that humble student of saying, what don't I understand about myself and my life? It puts you back on your heels and has you say, wait a minute, let me listen differently. And when we're so trying to get by and survive and make things happen and be productive, that's a whole lot of handle it, get it known, make it yours. I get it, right? Stay on top of it, stay in front of it, be proactive. There's a whole lot of knowing. So you see this, I have the edge of my brain. I know I'm kind of going on and on about it. It's important. It's important to this idea of beginning to become less crusty. I ran into a TED Talk recently given by Dolly Chu entitled How to Let Go of Being a Good Person and Become a Better Person. And she talks about the Nobel Prize winning philosophy called bounded rationality, which means that the human mind has limited processing power. There's that word limited. So it has to manage all of the data that's coming into it. And she went on to say in this TED Talk that some scientists believe, hold on for this, that at any given moment, 11 million pieces of information are coming into your mind, but only 40 of them are being processed consciously. Well, this takes my understanding of the conscious and unconscious ratio, that 5% to 95%, to an epically gargantuan level, because now we're placing actual numbers on the individual pieces of information. And just because I'm a bit of a geek, I calculated what 40 of 11 million pieces is, and it's 0.0000363636. That's like 3 billionth of the total amount of our brain is taking in. That's how much information we're actually taking in. Now think about what I'm trying to say. So when we think about the edge of our brain, we're also now thinking about how much our brain actually can take in, right? So I'm hoping you're making the connection. Crusty brain is the recognition that our brain, by its very nature, is kind of crusty. So she bounces off of this idea to describe what she calls bounded ethicality. And I encourage you to go watch her talk. But as she describes this, she says that because of the nature of the way our minds work, that we overestimate our inner compass. And that's what I was doing. I was overestimating my brain connectivity. And I was particularly drawn to her sharing because it supports this idea that the crusty brain is one that reinforces itself and overstates itself and overextends itself because it is bound within itself. Now think about this. Because it's bound inside itself, but what's bound from it is all of this information. The brain is at some level living in its own echo chamber, but because it hears the echo, it believes itself. Because it hears its echo, it believes itself. crusty, crusty. And I would add that because we're human beings trying to get our core needs met, that the brain work that's going on in the background, it's not only trying to cope with a bunch of sensory and emotional data that doesn't speak the same language as the cool and neutral intellect, it's trying to figure out how to reach out and touch others, to be one with people, to not be alone, to relate, to close the distance between what we're not aware of and the space that we occupy. Now think about that. In the background, all this stuff is going on, working and working and working. But at the front, we only perceive ourselves the way we do. I contend that this overestimation of the brain works to maintain relationship and connection to the outer world. But while doing so, it also constructs defenses and protective mechanisms that are tied to all of that data. Now, I'm going to say this one more time before we go to break. The overestimation of the brain, right? Because we're doing that, it now is work. The whole reason it does that is to try to maintain relationship and connection to the outer world, to others, to life, right? That's the way it does it. It tries to reach it through the brain. But while doing so, then, it also constructs these defenses and fences and protective mechanisms and gullies that are tied to all of that data that we don't actually have connection with. All right, when we come back, I have a challenge for you.
The best of holistic, spiritual, and conscious world. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM.
Ascending Hearts is no ordinary dating site, but a spiritual dating site with a purpose, to link you with your soulmate. We engineer the serendipity so you can trust that you will attune with someone that has the same matching vibration as you. Ascending Hearts, the conscious dating site for the spiritually aware. Try Ascending Hearts for free. AscendingHearts.com.
Imagine yourself being transported to India, to the banks of the Ganga and an ashram in Rishikesh. Visualize that you are welcome to satsang with an American sannyasi who shares the wisdom of her guru. Your visualization has manifested. Join Sattvi Bhagawati Saraswati for inspiration and transformation every Thursday at 11 a.m. Eastern on OMTimes Radio.
If I could be you,
and you could be me,
for just 1 hour.
If you could find a way
to get inside
each other's mind.
Walk a mile in my shoes.
Walk a mile in my shoes.
Walk a mile in my shoes.
We've all felt left out. And for some, that feeling lasts more than a moment. We can change that. Learn how at belongingbeginswithus.org. Brought to you by the Ad Council.
Walk a mile in my shoes.
All right, we are back talking about this idea of Crusty Brain. I'm Sam Parrotto, and you're listening to Expedition Self. So before we went to break, I have a challenge. And this is all about trying to weave together this idea that there is a limit to our own brain, but that our unconsciousness is actually trying to reach out beyond that all the time. And that creates this kind of crustiness that we don't even realize we're living out of. So if you and I are largely clueless because we're only aware and processing these 40 pieces of data versus the 11 million in a minute, but the 11 million are actually the source of what we're reaching for, how do we get to it? How are we actually going to see that? Well, it starts by recognizing how much crustiness is going on all the time. At the time that I walked to the edge of my brain, I was just really beginning my journey about the conscious and the unconscious. And so for me, it was a discovery of a lifetime. This idea that we actually are very closed systems, that we're closed off both from ourselves and we're closed to really seeing the world beyond this. I mean, and then we walk around smiling and greeting people and engaging with people as if we're the most open and shareable human beings. The illusion of our openness and how we see ourselves being human, it's kind of mind-boggling because nothing is how it seems. And mostly, it's not how it seems to us. See, that's what I'm hoping to kind of have you think about today, is that you're crustier than you think. I'm crustier than I think. And that although I have this illusion of openness, if I'm in repeat material, if I'm saying the same things, if I'm thinking the same things, it's probably that I'm coming out of the stuff I already thought, and I'm not operating on the other side of what I know. You know, a lot of the time on my social media walls, I'll see writing about, oh, trust yourself, believe in what you know what's best. Well, given what I'm sharing with you, we have to really consider what it would look like if we could walk around recognizing that you don't want to fully trust yourself in the way that I mean it, right? You want to always have some doubt. You want to always be looking for that which you can't see because you've got trillions of pieces of data that are closed off to you. You see, this self-doubt to me is actually the most empowering thing we can cultivate when it comes to growth work because it walks us boop, 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 up to the edge of our brain and says, what don't I know? What don't I understand? What can you teach me? What do I need to see to have more life for myself? This idea of us being a closed system, it does something else for us. It allows us to make room for us to recognize that other people don't know how closed off they are either. And of course, this seeds more empathy and compassion and humility, and ultimately more listening, which we need a lot of right now. Right? Because we make all these accusations and judgments about what people are doing or not doing. But if we recognize, oh, they're a closed system too, there's room. Right? The idea that someone is speaking to us or in relationship with us and that they're a closed system and we're a closed system, then it has us really start working to close the real distance between us, not the overestimated distance that comes from two brains not realizing how limited they are or how different they are or what they're really not agreeing to. And when we want to close distance, real distance, we work harder. And I think we're a little lazy. I think we'd rather just live in our world, in our heads. Let it be what it is. Let it be recognizable. See, when we want to understand our own missing pieces, then we bring more of our passion and intention to studying that which is missing. We do that. We don't just get caught up in the doing of life, right? We get caught up now in being in life, in being with ourselves. All right, let's close this down. Let's slow it down for just a moment. All conflict emerges from the closed system. All annoyance emerges from it too. All of the failures and the losses that you grieve and resent, they come from here too. And all of the dreams you don't actually chase or cause to happen, they come from this closed system too. Crusty brain. The crustier it stays means you will circle the same drain every day, every week, and every month. It might have different players, maybe some different food, a few different results from one day to the next, but they'll all feel like they're the same because the crustiness is recreating what it already knows as part of its overestimation of what it is. I know it's a little abstract here, but I think, if you kind of allow it to like settle in, I'm really saying that crusty brain is something worth focusing on. To acknowledge it for what it is and to get behind what's behind the wall. That closed system of the unconscious, and getting the conscious to open the gate to that which lies beyond and learn how to listen. Listen for the different kinds of ways that the unconscious communicates, because it communicates by giving you recurring thoughts, like little points to circle around. It communicates by bringing imagery. It communicates by making you tired, like affecting your energy level, right? Cardboardishness, right? So the project you've been trying to get off the ground, the one I've been trying to get off the ground, whatever is so about it, is a match to the crustiness of my brain and yours. I want to really pause here and help you see that this is why there really are no victims of life at some level. Because every single minute we make a choice. We decide who we're drawn to, how we spend our time, what we react to, and what we don't. Even if we're living in a world that's very confined. And it's really a byproduct of that humongous amount of material that's being kept in the brain vault and managed by the illusion of the conscious self. We can understand why we had a blow up with someone, why the marriage didn't work, why our child won't speak to us, why our business failed. But not easy, not like with the snap of a finger, right? Because we have to actually unwind and unwire and reconstruct our relationship to our whole selves and that of the brain, the crusty brain. And the other thing is, without unexpected events like weather problems or getting a speeding ticket or running into some detour on the way to the grocery store, we would keep playing out the same patterns and routines over and over. Without suffering and death and the unexpected, the closed system would remain closed. So you could say at this moment, well, then what are we doing here then? This is when I really believe that we're here to evolve. Otherwise, none of it makes sense to me. But what do you think? What do you think? How does it make sense? Right? This idea of this crusty brain, but this push to connect all the time, and then these unexpected things happening. And that the more we can recognize that we're closed systems, the more we want to be curious, the more we want to engage. If we're basically closed systems, then all of these unpredictable things happen to bust up that overestimated known part of the self. What else could it possibly be? Why would we be constructed like this then? I've pondered this a lot over the years. And, I'll get all caught up in life again and then return with the same questions. So how might we work with this crusty brain? Well, first off, it's reaffirming over and over that we are crusty brains, that we should know it to be so and appreciate its limiting qualities and acknowledge how hard it is to be a crusty brain and do life and deal with life. So that's the compassion and empathy for ourselves. This, stop trying to fight it, defy it, rebel from it, prove it not to be true, right? Accept that you're a closed system and there is something to be seen about all of that. The second thing is to accept that there is a limit to you and what you know and can see. And it's wider and deeper than you think. I was talking to someone the other day and they asked me a question and I said, I have no idea. And then I said, it's hard to believe, but I can actually not just say those words now, but I can recognize I really don't know. And then I laughed because I could remember how uncomfortable it was for me inside of my brain self to really acknowledge I didn't know something about everything a long time ago. I mean, I would take a stab at knowing anything, right? It didn't matter what it was. I'd have to find some way that I related to it or connected to it. The third thing is to recognize that listening is the greatest skill of the modern age of being a universal human being. This is not a small idea. Listen to the inside of you. Listen to what's outside of you. Listen for the different languages or ways of communicating. Listen for imagery that floats through your mind. Listen to the words others use and the ones they don't. Listen to how you're listening and notice when you finish someone's sentence for them because you've heard the same thing so many times. Listening is one of the few ways to hear the call from behind the brain. So you can listen more deeply to yourself and see what shows up. Like I did with that Pan character poking at the holes in my abdomen, asking me to open up. You can listen more deeply to your children or your friends or your family rather than attaching to the use of the same words to which you've already assessed their meaning. Right? We're always listening to what we already know, what we already thought, what we already concluded. But listen with new ears for what's not being said. Listen to every piece of internal data you can get your hands on. Make note of it. Put it in a journal. Store it in your mind so that you start creating a new pattern that notices more than 40 pieces of data a minute. See if you can clear your head, your ears, your frenzied life, and then practice listening. Usually what comes with this is you'll need a bit of patience because when you practice listening, it doesn't deliver on a schedule. So that's one of the elements of upping your listening game is waiting and not jumping to conclusions. And forming conclusions, I don't see as really listening. Right? Listening is the taking in, the exploring. Okay, that's the listening piece. Now, the next thing to deal with Crusty Brain is to search out new information about yourself. Now, you'll notice I don't say seek out new information about others. And that's because if you don't seek it out in yourself first, you won't actually realize it in others or understand it in the same way. And if you do recognize something in others, it's likely that it lives in you already. So as an aside, when two people keep pointing out what the other person is doing when they're doing it too, like, no, your problem is you're always finishing my sentences. The other one says, no, your problem is you're always finishing my sentences. Well, this is that dynamic playing out. So search out new information about yourself. That's the next step to opening a crusty brain. And incidentally, it will also help to add moisture to the cardboard parts of you. So new information comes from the sensory network of your body. It comes from the emotional experiences you've stored away. It's a byproduct of experiential activity where you're doing something and you're paying attention. And it comes from mining the past. It comes from skipping rocks across a pond and sitting curled up in the corner of a room that's too cold. New information also comes from listening to the feedback of life of others, of how your results go. You don't want to rule out any feedback from the world, but you also don't have to take it all the way to heart. So I have a word of caution here, is if you're going to validate every piece of feedback from your life and you haven't trained yourself to not assess and make things right and wrong, it's a bit dangerous. So it's likely that you may reinforce your closed system because you're the bad guy in your own brain. And it's a way to stay in the lead and control of the closed system that you're the keeper of. These 11 million pieces of data aren't all sensory and emotional. And this is one of the hard parts of getting access to the vault because they're all stored together. Facts about the world, watching what people do, the sun rising and the dark night with no moon. It's all a big bowl of cherries. So if you're going to utilize feedback to help you become less crusty, then it means you're going to have to sift through a ton of facts to find the emotional and sensory material that's gluing and globbing it shut. Okay, so I'm going to go all the way back to the beginning as we close out. Notice yourself every day, make it a practice. Look for new information. When the self gets paid attention to, it'll eventually help you see that you are not the all-knowing, that there's an edge where your brain stops and another's begins. And it will also help you realize that we are all one, working in a community, helping each other intentionally and unintentionally to break free from our own crusty brains. All right. Well, I want to say thank you for being with me here. I feel so strongly that the more we see our own limitations of crusty brain, that's going to open us up to being more fully who we are capable of being. So I wish you a wonderful week, and I hope that today's show helps make it a little more conscious.